going on, everybody? Welcome into The Highlight, the most serious business podcast on the internet for only the most serious business leaders and entrepreneurs and small business owners. And as always, I have my way too serious business friend and co-founder, Austin Lynch, on the call with us today. Austin, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, feeling serious as well. Got Gio on the call with us today. We're looking forward to a great conversation. And yeah.
Well, you got us here. We're sharing The Highlight today with a longtime friend of mine who we've had an interesting history together, and we share some commonalities in our resume. And Gio Senafe, or his friends call him Gio, is joining us on the show today. And Gio is a man of many talents, and that's why I'm really excited to have him on. But Gio is primarily responsible for all the M&A that happens at an amazing pet company. Gio, I'm going to give you the floor. Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about you, and then we'll dive in today.
Well, I love that introduction, first of all. So I just want to thank you for that. First time anyone said I had many talents, but my wife founded Bentleys Pet Stuff in 2008, and we got up to about 100 stores, corporate owned, and then made a strategic shift is what I read in an MBA book, I should refer to it as,
Smart.
to become a franchising company. So about a year and a half ago, we merged with Earthwise Pet Supply, the second or third largest at the time pet franchise as the franchisor. And we're now at about 180 stores opened and about 57 to 65 stores signed by not opened. My role in it is the acquisition of either real estate or existing independent stores to either become corporate-owned stores or into franchisees' hands. So it's been a wild ride. I've probably bought 75 stores, 77 through the last 5 years from 65 different owners. So it's been fun to see. It's just a delight because people are so easy to deal with, and it's no hiccups or problems. So
I was about to say big air quotes around that phrase. I feel
yes.
like.
Yep.
Hey, you know what's interesting? This just came to my mind, and I want to get into the rest of the conversation we sort of talked about beforehand. But this is something that I think a lot of people that start small businesses want to do. I think a lot of people have this dream, and they sort of have what Michael Gerber calls an entrepreneurial seizure, and they go start the thing, and they become the guy, and they open up their barbecue shop, or they open up their local pet store, right? And they're thinking one day, 10 years from now, I'm going to have 100 stores. Being somebody that went through that journey from one store to now over 100 stores, like what advice would you give somebody that's just starting out with that first store? Maybe they're 2 or 3 years into business and they're getting impatient.
So here's all I'll say. Either be 3 or 1,000, but only do the 100 or 300 or 1,000 if you want to sell. Because there's going to be a tipping point where your company is hot and valuable because of the growth before reality sets in of all of the expense and headaches it takes to operate them, and you lose control and everything. So the hindsight 2020 for me was we wanted to always pass the business down to our kids, right? We have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old boy now. That's too much to pass down. And it's too much to make sure it's all going right. And you lose a little bit of what made you special at 1, 2, 3, and 5. So if I could do it all over again, my wife's plan was always, let's do this one store. Let's make it the absolute best that it can be. Let's have a manager become a part owner. And don't wait till we have the right person doing the right thing till we go to store number 2. And I came in and blew that all up. But I missed out on the opportunity to sell the growth and the idea for the top dollar. So if you look at what's happening in the market today at a way higher level and bigger business, Peloton, WeWork, Uber, Chewy, Warby Parker, all of these things were worth way more in their infancy than they are today in the reality. Because the idea sells for more. So I would say where I'm different today than 7 years ago. 7 years ago, I wanted to be on the cover of Fast Company. Now I want to be on the cover of Slow Company, like slow and steady, because you get into debt and that rules your life. Like the commonality Chandler and I have is you see what debt does. It the more it's available, it exacerbates and accelerates inefficiencies, mistakes, and insecurities. The second it gets tight, which is the cycle the world's going through right now, it makes anything not profitable or anybody that much more disposable and everything. So I would just say to somebody, before I used to want 300 stores and 1,000 employees, and I used to brag. I'd be like, I got 480 employees. Now I want 10, and I want them to be phenomenal. And if I only own 3 stores and I have 400 franchisees that own their own business, and I can just help where I can, I'm way happier, and it's better for everybody. So I hope that answered that.
I totally
would just
get that.
say size isn't quality.
Yeah. Well, it's so many times we don't know. I think when we're starting a business, we don't know what we don't know, and we don't know what success actually is. Simon Sinek wrote a book in the last couple of years called The Infinite Game, which I'm sure you've heard of, but it's amazing. But it talks about how the game of business isn't really a game that has a winner or a loser. There's no real scoreboard. The only time you're out of the game is when you stop playing. And I wish I had read that book before I started Lyles Barbecue Company with my family, because when I started that, I literally remember having a conversation with a friend when I was in the Air Force getting ready to leave. And I was talking to him. I was like, hey, I got this big dream. You know, I want to take this barbecue I've been doing on the side for fun and catering, and I want to open 1,000 stores in 10 years. Like, that was my big pie in the sky dream, right? And now, looking back on all that, now that I'm on the other side of it and the business is closed and we had 6 years and I've had 3 years to think about it, I go, man, if I had 5 barbecue restaurants around the central Kentucky area of Lexington, Kentucky, I would just be the guy in barbecue. My family would be the family in barbecue. I'd have had all the money I wanted. I would have had all the creative freedom I wanted. I'd had everything I wanted when I started the business. And I just wouldn't have been able to be on any magazine covers, but like, I didn't really want that, you know? And so it's good advice that you're giving. The line you said was perfect, was know what you want before you really get involved doing all this stuff. Because if your goal is to build as big a company as you can and sell it, great.
Yeah,
but if you just want to have freedom and financial freedom.
I mixed the plans. Yep. Like my wife's first 4 stores, the first 4 stores my wife opened are still 4 of the top 10 out of 187 14 years ago. That doesn't make me look like a winner when I've gotten us in a ton of debt and stressed out and almost bankrupt several times. She's like, man, if we would have just stayed with those 4, shit would be pretty good, right? Life would be pretty awesome. So, you know, that's the one thing. The one thing I'll say, the private equity gets a bad name, and everyone always says it. But what's beautiful about them versus family businesses or individuals investing in your business, you know what their MO is up front. I'm getting in and I'm getting out in 4 to 7 years. The variable is the group, the fund, and every decision is, hey, Chandler, will this decision make us worth more 5 years ago? We were running a family business on steroids, and you lose the efficiencies of size, because we would still make emotional decisions, be like, oh, Austin's a nice guy. I know the store sucks, but his mom just went in the hospital and his car broke down. So you lose the inefficiency of the scale because you're still behaving in a manner that works with 5 barbecue places where you know the people. You can go fill in, you'd load up your car, and if one store's out of barbecue sauce, you're grabbing it from the other one and driving it over. So I would just say pick a lane. To your point about winning, that's the thing that evolves the most. So 5 years ago, I used to brag at who was in my phone, how many people I talked to in a day, everything. You know what I brag about now? I only talked to 3 people today, babe. It was the best day in the world. For me, winning today is the least amount of people that I have to talk to. I can choose to talk to 80, but the least, that's winning. So just be open to your definition of winning changing. And we're all young, and families will help evolve all of that, because I used to love flying 40 weeks a year. That's when we met, Chandler. I was on an airplane all day doing deals. Now you cannot get me out of Tampa and missing football practice. I don't care what deal you have. I'm like, either I'm home by 4 or we're meeting Sunday, or Zoom's good enough. So that's my other advice is don't think that the winning definition you had day one lives.
Yeah. It sounds like you just need to be really clear about what you want. I mean, to your point, you can set these huge, giant goals that sound really good in the end, but, to your point about having 4 or 5 stores, those can operate extremely efficiently, bring you the freedom, the money, like Chandler was saying, the creative direction, the freedom there. I mean, it seems like you just need to be really clear, and for maybe first timers, it's probably not that easy to really know what that might look like for your individual.
But that's actually great. So what I'll say is my 9-year-old plays tackle football at a really competitive level, right? And the hardest thing for me was after he got hit hard, he started playing different. Some of the beauty was before he knew what it felt like to get hit, he wasn't holding back. He wasn't scared. Once he got the ever-living snot pissed out of him, then all of a sudden for a minute he was scared. And I go, this is when you're going to lose because you're thinking too much. So don't say first timer or done it 22 times. Sometimes my wife started a business in the recession of 2008 in high-end pet retail, where if you went into Arlington Heights, within 4 miles of her store, you were getting hit with a postcard and dog treats. She didn't know any better. Today, she would never open. Chandler, you were at that spot. Today, she'd never open in the same spot because it's not by a grocery store. It's not by a Target or a Costco. At the time, she did the only thing she could get approved for and was cheap. Guess what? That store makes more money than any store that will ever exist in our pet space, because the rent is so cheap, because nobody would be caught dead putting a business in there, but she built it from scratch. So somebody getting new in the pet space would never duplicate that. So the misnomer, and I'm not trying to criticize you, Austin, I just think it's important for your audience. Don't think because it's your first time, you actually less than somebody that's done it 8 times before. Sometimes the first time guy has the advantage. Does that make sense?
Yeah, Yeah, it's almost like ignorance is bliss at that point.
Yeah. You got it. That's
I will say we had this conversation a few weeks back on the podcast. We talked about people that are starting a business, they want to like completely reinvent the wheel. And I think that there's a ratio there where you're like 80% emulation of people that have come before you and it worked. And then you do 20% of iterating on top of it where you bring something new to the thing. So what she didn't invent the idea of a store, but she did sort of accidentally, luckily stumble into maybe an area that had never had a store before that nobody else would touch. And now all of a sudden there's a little bit of a competitive advantage there. The rent is cheap. You know the neighborhood, so you know what really cheap ads you can run locally versus like a big giant, Petco or something like that. They don't have enough nuanced information of what's happening on the ground.
She just became a part of the
take care of those competitive advantages.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's where there's
something else.
Go ahead.
I was just going to move on, but the thing that you're talking about too that keeps coming up is flexibility. I mean, as an entrepreneur, as a business leader, you have to be flexible. And I think that a lot of times we can get married to our ideas and our predictions as entrepreneurs, and we can sort of become a little bit hurt on the inside when they don't work out that way. So what advice would you give somebody that, you've been in business a long time, so you've definitely had a lot of failures, but you've had more wins that have brought you guys to where you're at now. Like, how do you handle staying flexible in the face of an idea that doesn't work out?
I'm the wrong guy to ask because I'm probably a sociopath by definition. So if I have any skill in life or business, it's that's never been an issue for me. It's more of a struggle with Lisa, some of our partners, some of our stuff. For me, it's hard because it's not. It's like I've never had to worry about being too tall to fit on an airplane, so I haven't thought about how to handle
You
it.
and me both, Gio.
Yeah, right. So I'm not that, like, if there's one topic I can't help you on how to navigate, it's that. Because if for me, it's just never a thought. When something is wrong, it's just wrong, and I move on from it. That's got a ton of benefits to it. It also, everything's got a balcony and a basement. The balcony is, nothing is a prolonged death with me. The negative is when you're dealing with other humans that have a heart and a soul and humanity, it comes across very callous, and I don't mourn anything. So we've incubated ideas so much, and 3 years ago, our partner, everyone had this idea. We're going to just own the direct to consumer online marketing game, e-commerce game. About $7 million of burn in. I go, I'm shutting it down today. And no meetings, not let's have 44 things. And everyone got mad. And I go, okay, the evidence is here. We just lost 7 million. I got bad news. We're going to do more business next week. So we're going to lose another $230,000. Who's chipping in? So that part, bud, I'm the guy you want. My wife has learned to use me in the scenarios that benefit her. And that's why I think whether it's husband, wife, business partners, family, you want people that have offsetting skill sets. So my wife's the nurturing, compassionate, empathetic, moral compass that leads everything. Everything after that is me to just be like, done, let's move on. It's over, let's move on. It's over. And she can balance out how it comes across callous, but ego's the driver of what you're talking about. I come across very egotistical and loud and spontaneous. And then once people know me more than 4 months, I always get like the most backhanded compliment. They're always like, God, you're never what I thought you were when I met you. And I'm like, I don't even know how to take that. And the truth is, I'm very humble and strategic. I just act quick. Right? And Lisa would get buried in ideas. Married, being a parent helps you change all of that, because you always think you know your kid, and then you go buy a bunch of toys on what they're into today, and then they make a U-turn on you, and you're like, what did I buy all of that for? So I'm not the guy to help with that. I would just say to you, look in the mirror and recognize it's your ego holding on to that. That's all it is. I don't care what anyone else tells me. It's ego.
Yeah. I think you still said something there that you're not giving yourself enough credit, if I'm being honest. I think that you're self-aware enough to know where your strengths are, where your basement and where your balcony are from your personality standpoint. And you're still able to, I've been in those meetings where you're able to leverage other people in the room that have different strengths than you, and to hear them out and to find a way to, for what's best for the company, marry what you're good at and what everybody else is good at. And so you are able to stay flexible in that regard. I don't think anybody wins long-term in business just being an outright tyrant. I just don't think it's possible.
No. And I agree with that. I think what I had to learn from when I know you, what I had to learn was I used to be in the meeting and then be a part of the next 20 things afterwards. And that's when I'm destructive. So now I'm just in the meeting, and then I'm in the conclusion, right? So like, think of a restaurant.
Sounds like flexibility to me. Sounds like you
it
changed.
is. No, and I appreciate that. But it took getting punched in the face. It took losing really good people a lot for me to make that pivot. To your point, you're exactly right.
That brings me back to an analogy you made just a minute ago. I think you said it was Sebastian that's playing tackle football now, and he was playing differently, and then all of a sudden he gets hit, popped one really good time, and now all of a sudden the way he approaches the game is different. I think that's the same with business, right? I think that we all approach any scenario, especially in the early days, and then all of a sudden we get hit a few times. And now on the other side, I approach everything differently. Like I remember with Lyles Barbecue, I literally quit. I didn't quit the Air Force. My contract ran out, and I told my wife at the time, God bless her heart. I was like, we're going to go sell barbecue on the side of the road out of a tent. Yeah, you know what I'm going with this.
Great,
like
dude.
we're going to go sell barbecue out of the side of the road. Yeah, I'm going to make millions of dollars selling barbecue out of a tent that I got from Sam's Club and a smoker that I got from some random welder in northern Alabama. And we're going to make no money. We had like 10 grand in our bank account at the time. We had nothing. And like, I think that whole first year we might have brought home like 5 grand. And it's like, we didn't have kids at the time. We didn't have a house. I didn't really have adult responsibilities yet. So I got lucky and was able to do that. But, you know, Austin will tell you this time around with the company, like we're very slow. We have a massive cash position. We are building out contractors before we're building out employees. I mean, I do think there is a lot of wisdom in I don't have a problem with failing. And I don't think I ever don't have a relationship with someone just because they failed in the past or there was some like, unless it's like a values based thing. And I don't believe you can really change your values necessarily, but if you have a value failure, that's one thing. But for the most part, it's like, hey, based on the information we had, we all made the best decision we could, and you know, it didn't work out. And so, but the problem comes in is when you keep making the same mistake over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I think,
you know,
I'll say this: you once you get punched in the face once or have a failure, we all, because everyone that I know that's successful, and I'm lucky to know a ton of them, they all have a failure. There's just, it's inevitable. I think when you're young or early, your failures can be knockout blows. I think now, anything I go into now, I'm never going to let myself get in the position where it's a knockout blow, right? And that's what I taught Sebastian. I go, hey, bud, unless you can't get up from the hit, like live in the moment, pat the other guy. And I always show him Brett Favre videos. And granted, Brett Favre was on Vicodin and a bunch of stuff. But I always show him like...
He doesn't need to know that.
Yeah, right? It's like Favre used to always... Favre would get wrecked. And then he'd go hit the other guy in the helmet or pat him on the butt and go, great hit. And it used to freak the other guy out because it's like, I just gave you my best shot and you're smiling and you're congratulating and thanking me. So in relation to business, my advice to anybody starting today is your chances shouldn't be knockout blows. And the bad part about you guys are like me, you love consuming content, right? And the only negative about reading a lot of books, because I read probably as much, if not more than you guys, all walks of life, everything. But the Rocky version of business is always the most popular book and the best story, where it's Ray Kroc on McDonald's with 1 foot in bankruptcy. And if he didn't get this one order, you know, this one franchise, so they'd be out. Steve Jobs. Yeah. That's inspiring, but it's not realistic. The better thing to do is not be too conservative and growth, but grow yourselves. So like going back to my stores and retelling how I would do it is the only way I'd ever get back to 100 the other way is if the 99 other ones could absorb the 100th failing. It's the same way when it was 98, it could absorb the 99th. What I did wrong was I borrowed money. I'm the U.S. government. Let me borrow borrowed money. Let me start a new one before the other one's ready, you know, and self-sufficient. So I think our job and what should change is the glorious story of being on the brink of a knockout and coming back, because that's dangerous. Like that happens.
It's the exception,
so
not the rule. Yeah, it's the exception, not the rule. I mean, there was I don't know if you know who Adam Grant is a great author. He's
fantastic.
Professor at Wharton. He wrote a book, Originals, and in Originals he talks about how you have a much better chance of succeeding in business if you start it later in life, so 40 years old and older.
Sure.
And that's against the myth, which is, hey, you drop out of college and you go start something. And he also said that there was it was a myth that you needed to go all in on it day one. You know, Warby Parker guys were like, the story he told was the Warby Parker guys, how they they had jobs, they had additional things they were doing. They
Sure.
didn't drop everything to just go raise a bunch of money and do it. They actually had to go figure it out before they did it. And I don't think those stories are as fun to tell because they're not as dramatic, and so they don't get told.
Correct.
And I mean, and that's
They don't
like
get made to
the
book.
businesses around you.
Yeah.
Exactly. You're going to feel a lot of pressure as a leader of an organization to go out and do the fun, dramatic things because you feel like you need that story. But, listen to what Gio's telling you. You don't need it. Just put one foot in front of the other and grow the way you want to grow consistently. What were you going to say, Austin?
Oh, I as we were talking about the knockout blows, it kind of reminded me of two things. First of all, Chandler, one of the things that you always said early on in starting this business in terms of when we will and when we won't take chances, it's one of my favorite things I tell people all the time is if it bankrupts the brand or if it bankrupts the business, we don't do it. And
Yep.
so, if it's going to completely change the public perception of our business in a negative light, we don't do it. And if it's going to put us in a financial position that we can't afford, we don't do it. So it reminded me of that. But the other thing that I thought of that was just something, Gio just mentioned, we're all big content consumers. I was listening to a podcast just the other day where they were discussing, kind of a myth or a legend, I guess, from the FedEx founder. I don't know if y'all have heard this story, but supposedly, early on in the days of... Yeah, well, they said that early on in the days of FedEx, they were about to go bankrupt or something, and the founder took the company's last like $5,000 and
Come on, dude. He went in one.
He says he-
at the casino. Like that's the most dangerous story to tell.
oh, it's crazy, yeah, and it's like people believe it. Now, I think he actually came on and said that was not completely true, but it's just it's like those are the stories people get drawn to, right? And it's so easy to get sucked in and say, oh, well, I've got $5,000. I need to hire this guy tomorrow. I'll just hit the blackjack table and
Yeah, let me give you the real life application of it. In 2019, we probably had $1 million in AP, and we had gotten sued, and we had lost our funding partner, and I had about 130 grand in the bank. Okay. And I'm a gambler, guys. I love poker. I love gambling. So your story, Austin, resonates. So I'm like, okay, I could take 130 grand and bet on 2 underdogs in a parlay in the NFL, and all of our profits can go away, right? Or I can call all the people that I owe $1 million to and say, I can give you 10% down now, and then do payment terms on the money that I owe you over 3 years, and then net 7 on any new business, and let's just start over. Thank God I picked option B because the 2 underdogs both lost, so we wouldn't be talking right now.
Of course they did.
Yes, I would be the guy.
Let me know the next time you. I was
What?
gonna say, let me know the next time you're feeling something on the football gambling stuff.
Because you'll
just
go the
let me know. I'll
opposite?
fade your picks.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
I'm just gonna
That's
fade
the
a little bit.
recommendation.
I'm
So
trying to go
that
to.
story. Yeah, that story is the most dangerous. And the last advice
it's
I'll
terrible.
give on this. Yeah, last advice I'll give on this topic is WeWork's a great example. And if you haven't read the WeWork book, you got to read it because it's the example of when you actually get what you want, how it's the worst thing for you. And it's not. I don't know the CEO. I don't know the truth of exactly what happened. But what is factual is all of a sudden a multi-billionaire comes and says to a young kid, I'm going to give you unlimited amount of money and just grow, and don't worry about this, don't worry about that, and just keep getting into debt and keep doing this until I'm not. And then you're exposed and you're vulnerable, right? Chandler, sound a little familiar on some stuff?
Oh yeah.
So be careful on credit and who you're getting it from, because it's total vulnerability at that point. And if you, to exactly what you guys are saying, if you haven't laid down the foundation, like Austin, you said it best, if it doesn't bankrupt the business, if it doesn't bankrupt the brand, but people will take you literal at that and be like, well, no, I'm borrowing the money to do this. It doesn't do it. It's what are the unintended consequences of it stopping? So that, again, WeWork was a prime example. Not saying the outcome would have been different or something, but that guy fed them money, had them change paths, just thinking of growth, and then changed his mind. And then all of a sudden it was like, well, no. Like, I'm not funding losses anymore at WeWork. And it's like, well, we just pivoted to it. So if you have your foundation set, just make it impenetrable. To show you the difference between my wife and I, on the product side, you couldn't break her foundation, right? I wish I had that same fortitude as her on the financial side. Do you know what I mean? Because I definitely was swayed. I would get caught up, and we all do.
Yeah.
But I think the advice you guys are giving is fantastic. Like slow and steady.
I was going to say, I don't think that. I think some of that is just it's the actual real life small business ownership MBA, and you can't go to school for it. And you can go to school and you can read a textbook about small business financing or whatever. But until you're sitting in a boardroom, looking at a P&L, looking at a balance sheet, reading Yelp reviews, having investors and lenders, and until you feel the pressure of all that around you in the room, you'll never know. And everything will just be theory for you. And then it's always going to look way more optimistic than it should. I mean, entrepreneurs at the end of the day are optimists. Like, they believe they can make the world a better place in their little corner. Otherwise, they wouldn't take all the risk and do all the pain in the butt stuff to get the thing launched. And so I remember the thing I'll say about debt is this. When we started the company, when we started our first company, Lyles Barbecue, we had no debt. We $5,000, we did the thing. And we grew it organically, and it was a pain in the ass. I mean, we worked our faces off. It was 80-hour, 100-hour weeks, but we cash flowed everything. First location was this little shanty town gas station restaurant. And then, finally, after 4 years, we borrowed a little bit of money, $100,000, to open a really nice store. And that was finally the store that took us over $1 million. The problem is that I had gone so long without borrowing money that I was sort of afraid of it. And then once I got a taste of it, and worse off almost, it worked almost perfectly after 4 years of testing and iterating and growing organically. All of a sudden it worked. And I was like, oh, so I can not have to pay the price of 4 more years of grinding.
Yep.
It's a law. And I ended up borrowing another $150,000 to open a brand new concept that had no testing, we had no background in. It was an insane deal, and it was fun and exciting, and it made my ego feel great, but it violated the rule, which was if it didn't work, it was going to bankrupt the company. And sure enough, 4 or 5 months later, it was gone.
We've all been there, and that is the fun part. And that is that I didn't go to college. I barely graduated high school. So I'm the right guy you're talking to, where I'm like, man, I'll take what I've learned the last 15 years over anything in the world. First off, I just love it. I'm not going to lie. I like the thrill of it, the chase. Mm-hmm. I like the rebuilding back up. So, I have to balance that out. Cause now I have kids and stuff like that. But yeah, dude, I think it's all logical stuff when you're older. It is that balance, because some of the risk taking and the naivete and the leveraging is also why you're in the spot. So I don't think our IT director, I'll give a shout out to, I don't know if you met Steve back then, but he's the most frustrating guy I've ever met, because he's the most perfect human being. He graduated from Princeton at 16. He can play classical music. He's an IT whiz.
At 16?
At 16, in the middle, at age 25, he decided he wanted to be a police officer and moved to Cleveland and worked the midnight to 8 in the morning shifts and everything. Just, it's annoying, because it's I'm lucky to get home every day without getting lost. And he's inventing, some nuclear thing that distills water real fast. But what
he's the most interesting man on the planet.
He is. He's boring and interesting, if that makes sense. He's dry and boring. But
he probably has a lot of information about every topic.
Don't get him on conspiracy theories. But he met me at my lowest point. What I thought was my lowest point, when our partnerships didn't work. I'm about to lose my wife's business because of my decision making, everything. And he's so annoying, because he goes, "You're exactly where you're meant to be." And I go, dude, please don't, like, we're not in San Francisco. Like, I'm not drinking cold brew coffee here and wearing Birkenstocks. He goes, no, buddy. He goes, just trust me, every day you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And I would have never gotten into grooming because for years I made absolutes. That's my other advice. Don't ever make absolutes. I used to swear to my staff, I'm never going to get into grooming. I don't want to deal with grooming dogs. Now that's all I talk about. Okay. And they're all like, what happened?
Vividly.
Yes. Like, I was against it. I would have never gotten into it. Then I would have never been like, well, shit, I can't buy stores. I can't open more stores. What else can I do? And look into franchising. When I bought the small franchisor, Mike from Earthwise was smart enough to know, shit, I don't want Gio as a competitor. So he approached me for a merger only to sidebar a competitor. You know what I mean? And now today I'm like, oh my gosh, thank God I was at rock bottom. Yeah. March of 2019, like literally, like we're at that moment. You wouldn't know Austin for your sister with adoption. We had a failed adoption that will go down in the record books. It'll be a movie one day because nobody has ever seen it. Like, we were in the hospital, we had the baby, the mom left, she then came back. Like, it was terrorizing. The whole hospital suffered. We ended up with our 2 boys because that happened, because they lived the entire moments with us. And then right now, if you accidentally say adoption in Clarksville, Mississippi, somebody's probably handing out my phone number because we went through that horrific thing. So, what I'll say is, Chandler, your failures, your risk taking. Also, I would never do what you guys are doing. Like, go talk into a camera and hope somebody watches it and listens. Like, that's a risk I would never do in my life. Because if I saw 3 views and I knew 2 of them were my mom, I would be heartbroken. And I'm not saying you guys have 3 views. Yeah. So you still haven't lost your risk taking. Just if this fails, it's just embarrassment that lives on the internet that your daughter's going to see forever and be like, what were you thinking? But other than that, it doesn't bankrupt the brand. So you're okay.
I'm very lucky to have good friends like both you, Gio, and Austin to constantly remind me where I fall short, and it keeps me humble, man. I'll be honest with you. It's God sent because I need it.
Yep, perfect.
So we ask this question of everybody that comes on. We call it our 10X question, and it's sort of you can take it a bunch of different ways. But if we basically were able to write you a check for a 10X budget, and we were going to help you, get organizationally stronger with that money, that was the only rule. Like, what would you spend that money on with what you're doing now to make the organization you've got run better?
Systems. So, because the negative of my wife and I, as you guys learned, for me to just try and get onto this podcast, is neither one of us are information technology inclined or like it or value it or appreciate it, because I'm the guy that I've never walked into a meeting with a computer. I don't email. Like, I'm a dinosaur at where I should be 81 years old. The biggest failure I did to the company was not prioritizing systems and IT and infrastructure, without question. Mike, the leadership team at Earthwise, who handles everything now, probably maybe overvalue it the other way, which is way better than undervaluing it. But if you're just speaking about me, where I've always underspent and under prioritized, is the systems and IT, the tracking of stuff, the scaling of stuff. We were always really good at the hand-to-hand combat of marketing, which is the only way for businesses in our industry to survive, because Google AdWords, that kind of stuff, it's so difficult for us to compete with Chewy and Petco and PetSmart and everything. That we've always been community driven and neighborhood and adoption events for pets and dog brewery, like that stuff. But I would say IT, and I would say almost everybody should double whatever they're spending, because it's usually probably not enough. And the negative to Steve, the wondrous IT person I was telling you, where he hurt my business, and I'm not saying anything I don't say to his face, is he's such a bad salesman that he didn't even talk me into the stuff that I should have done. Like, you get me selling IT, everybody will be overly IT'd, right? Because I can sell anything. He's a nerd that couldn't sell water in the desert. So I'm like, dude, you should have pushed me. If you believe in it, push me, right? So IT is the answer.
That's a good answer. I have met many business owners that are just running around and everything's broken all the time. And I mean, Austin will tell you, like, when we get a hold of people's advertising campaigns, basically what High Beam does is we're like a lot of people can't afford a full-time marketing department. Sure. So we come in and we're like a part-time thing, and we get to get a hold of stuff.
That's genius.
Yeah. And so it's great for companies, especially between that $1 and $20 million range, depending on what their EBITDA is. But what's funny is that when we get a hold of these businesses that are doing $5-10 million a year in sales, and then we start asking them for systems, they just don't exist. Yeah. And like, now it's on us as an organization to come in behind them and help them put it all back together. And it's really good advice. The E-Myth Revisited is probably one of my favorite books. I know we're all big content guys here, and it talks a lot about systems and how that will help you elevate as a company, because what it does is it helps you replicate. So like Gio talks about earlier in the episode, how Store One is crushing it because the artist is there. Lisa is there every day, and she is making it happen, and she understands the art of it. But what happens is like you're talking about, all of a sudden we have a store in Ann Arbor, and they don't have the same artist in the store making it happen just magically. The way you can get 80-90% of the way there and actually grow and scale is to take Lisa's art, or whatever the entrepreneur is that started the business, their art of creating the business, and systematize it as best you can so that anybody can get the playbook in front of them and execute it if they're competent and willing. And then all of a sudden, you can grow the business as big as you want. But I will tell you, the biggest headache for most people is going from that first store to, like Gio said, the second store, because those systems that you don't have, they really don't show up when all of a sudden you're not there to just have all the answers in store number 2. So I love that. Nobody has suggested systems yet, but that's a good one.
It is,
dude.
That's
a really good answer.
Because if you have that foundation set, so by the time it's like insurance, right? If you don't have it and you find out you need it, it's too late, right? So I look at now anything that I do, systems. Steve runs my life now. I'm joking, but it's like whatever I do, I go, Steve, if you were me, what would you do? Because then I know I can put layers on top of it and the backbone. Where I failed the company, and I always say me, is I grew it at breakneck speed. And in retail especially, imagine at one point we had 31 different POS systems we inherited.
Yeah. At that point, you're just scaling problems.
Dude, you couldn't get a financial report that didn't look like it was in a different lane. Like, Sebastian could have done our financial reports and probably been more accurate than what the culmination of systems were. And that's where private equity's smart, right? I used to buy a place and I'd be like, you know what? I don't want to hurt Chandler's feelings, so we're going to transition stuff over time and all of this. Private equity buys a store. They shut down at 5 p.m. The crew comes in overnight. Tomorrow you walk in. It's new systems. This is how you clock in. This is how you input. This is payroll. You don't like it, we'll replace you. So they at least got efficiency on their side. So that's IT. Yeah. It rules us all.
Yeah. It's really good. And, I'm going to take a minute here. I got to pay the bills, Gio. I'm a salesman, and so I'm going to let you grade me on my selling ability here. Okay. Right. Here's the ad read. All right. So Gio's talking about you need systems. Well, here's the thing. You're a busy entrepreneur, busy business owner. There's a lot of busy B words in there. You don't know what you don't know about marketing. You don't know how to build those systems, and your time is too valuable. You should be out there selling. So you need to get a guy, get a girl, get a team that comes in, does all the marketing for you. You outsource that problem to somebody else. You outsource your accounting. You should outsource your marketing. Just because you know how to log into Facebook, Gio doesn't know how to log into Facebook. I remember that. But you might. And don't think for a second that just because you can log into Facebook or you have some 19-year-old girl on your team that's doing all your social media for you that you know how to market your business online. So if you're interested, go to highbeammarketing.com, fill out the lead form there, and we'll be happy to do a discovery call with you to see if we'd be a good fit for your team. And that's it, Gio. What would you rate me 1 to 10 on a live impromptu?
10. 8 out of 10. You got to add something in your pitch.
I like it. I need notes.
It's not an expense, it's an investment. It's the thing that people like going into the recession. They're all the most that are gonna go out of business, they're gonna go out of business because they're gonna cut marketing now when they actually need to do it the most. Right?
Yeah.
So
there's a lot of market share to be gained in the next 18 months
like
minimum.
You're like
That's
just
absolutely true.
Yeah. So if you're the guy, so think like this. I'll be a 10 out of 10 salesperson for you. A year and a half ago, let's say it's the barbecue business, I will make you a promise. In 90 days from now, Google AdWords for specific words will be cheaper than they were a year and a half ago because there's less people paying for them. But there's still as many people consuming them, right? And there's still as many, as big of a market share. So, you know, in the times that are, any sales pitch you do now, talk to people about the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, because that's all everybody is scared about. And nobody's worried about today because it's November 13th and whatever business you're in, you're typically going to get a Santa Claus rally till December 31st. So my only recommendation to you guys, because you are doing the needed work on who's going to pick the winners and losers that aren't run by the artist, right? Like Lisa in one single store, Lisa will thrive regardless because she'll work 20 hours a day if she has to, and she'll do whatever. But take those scenarios out. In any normal business, everybody looked good the last 2 years because of helicopter money, fake money, and all the nonsense. The next 12, 15, 18 months, it's all going to come down to marketing. I'm not being sarcastic. It's literally going to be who can be in front of the person in the right way. So the same way at our companies, I tell all of our staff, understand that your customer now is worth less than they were 8 months ago. And they may not know it, but they may have to lower the type of pet food they're feeding. They may have to save money somewhere. Start talking now about switching, coupons, and take away the anxiety, the embarrassment, the fear, where it's like we're all doing it. The same way I talk about 5 months, 8 months, 12 months from now, you should in your ads be addressing the elephant in the room that, hey, I'm Chandler. I'm Austin. I'll make you a promise. In 5 months, it's going to be way more difficult to do business than it was 18 months ago. The difference is there's going to be less of your competition doing it. So let me flip the opposite. The market share shrinks 10% or 15%. Let's say it's a 20% correction. The competition's going to shrink 3x, 4x that. So if you used to have 10 people competing, now you have 3. Yeah, the market's smaller, but it's disproportionately smaller than the loss in competition. So that's my constructive.
It's great advice, and I will tell you too that marketing, and Austin's our paid media guy, so he's the wizard that runs all the technical stuff on the back end, and he will tell you that it takes time to ramp up these ad campaigns, and they don't just turn on and magically start working. You're looking at 90 days before they're really up and humming. So I like it. I got a note here, Gio. My next sales pitch, I'm going to add the time element because that's a good one. That's a good trip. So Austin, you and I love it, man. You delivered on the sales stuff. So we're gonna have to have you on again in the future to let's just talk sales because I would love that conversation. We're definitely gonna do that. Hopefully I can get into your top 3 conversations for a day. I know you got a limit now, so maybe like 6 months from now we'll
it, buddy. Whenever you guys need.
That's right. All right, Austin, you've been waiting. Jump in. I know you got there was something personal for you that we sort of hinted at, but I know you wanted to bring it up one more time here at the end.
Well, yeah, Gio, at the end of every episode, we usually try to ask some kind of question, whether it's fun, whether it's personal, whatever that might be, to just get to know a little bit more about you. And so before we jumped on, we were talking about kind of a similarity that the two of us have. You've got 2 boys. one of which is named Miles, which my son is named Miles, so that's crazy. But aside from that, my sister is finishing up the process of adopting from Haiti. That's going to be a very new change to our family, and you've adopted 2 boys yourself. And so I would love to just see if you've got one piece of advice that you would send me out on. I know you kind of gave me a couple earlier, but what's the one thing that, if you were going to give a piece of advice to me and my family about kind of a way to be adaptable, flexible, a way to change kind of with this new addition to the family, what would that be?
Be flexible, bud. Adoption, the thing that bothers me about adoption is, and it's not people's fault, so don't take that, but naturally everyone's question to me is, oh, can you and your wife not have kids? And in our scenario, we don't even know why we haven't gotten pregnant. We had decided early on, I grew up without a dad, so I always wanted to adopt. And then Lisa was like, yeah, I'd love to adopt. And we were going to adopt regardless of if we had our own kids or we're not. She's nervous. Yeah. She's going to get pregnant now that she's whatever age she is. And just just for God's plan, it to be like, all right, we're at the tail end. But I would just say you have to instill in that kid that the adoption was a choice, not a backup plan. And that's going to be your hardest part, to go against what the narrative of adoption is. So like, I am not a money motivated person. That's not my style. Like, I love my life, and I can survive on $31 a day or $81 a day. Like, it's not against people that don't, but like, why I do like making a ton of money and want to make more money is to help the adoption agencies and help change the rhetoric around it to be understand that for most people it's a choice, not a backup plan. And if you start changing the narrative, more people will be doing it and everything. So that would be my biggest advice, because regardless, your nephew is going to have insecurities, everything. And this is the last thing. This is the most important thing I'll say to you. So for the record, I adopted 2 black kids in America, 2 black boys, which you can understand depending on who I sit with. Like, in any meeting that has 3 or more white males, I let it come up pretty early on that I have black adopted kids, just to prevent any shit from getting said that then gets awkward. But my job as a dad, and what I recommend to your sister, from when my kids were 2 days old, every day I tell them, they don't understand it, but they will one day. I say, guys, you're going to be depressed some days, happy, sad, mad, angry. You're going to get the girl. You're not going to get the girl. You're going to win a game. You're not going to win a game. Don't think that's because you're black or adopted. That happens to everybody. Because I think the shell people get into is divorced families. Like, I grew up without a dad in a wealthy community. And when I was younger, I was like, God, I'm sad because we don't have money, or my dad's not here. And then, like, I got to know my friends, and I'm like, shit, they're just as sad, if not more sad than me or Ingrid. Because guess what? That's being an adolescent. That's being a teen. That's being a kid. So I think be upfront. This is where my sociopath callousness, my wife holds their hand and is like, oh, boys, everything. And I'm like, look, guys, you're going to get made fun of. Somebody's going to say some dick comment about being adopted. Somebody's going to say something stupid. They're stupider than you are. Get over it. And if you weren't adopted and you were 5'1", they'd be saying it about you being a midget. If you weren't a midget and you were fat, they'd be saying it about you being fat. If you weren't fat and you were rich, they're going to find something to say. Go on the offense. Like, introduce yourself. My name's Sebastian. I have a loudmouth Italian as a dad, and I'm adopted. Bring it on. Because what are they going to say afterwards? But the truth is, the truth is they're going to go through stuff, right? Not everyone. Does your sister look like you?
Yeah, she does.
Right? White and not black. Yeah. Not everyone you guys know and are associated are going to be cool with it. Mm-hmm. Like, let me just be crystal clear. It will bring out a cleansing of humanity in situations you'll ever know. So that's all I'll say to you is like, it's still the greatest thing in the world. And I make jokes about it because that's my way of dealing with stuff, but she's going to deal with shit like she is. So give her a coping mechanism to know what's coming.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
I feel like she's been preparing for war, but that is great advice, Gio. And you've offered the kind of open-ended phone in case I ever got the questions. I certainly appreciate that.
Yeah, I can't help you in IT or Google AdWords, but that topic I can help you on.
Well, we can maybe help you
call
with that
Steve
stuff
for
too.
IT.
Perfect. Cool.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, Gio, man, I really appreciate you jumping on. I know you're
Awesome.
busy, and I know you got limited phone calls, so you squeezed us into your top 3 today. This was amazing.
Yeah.
We appreciate everybody out there listening, and we will see you next week.